Hello Curious Wanderers, welcome to my video. So this video I decided to do a painting of a girl looking up to what to me anyway is like an artificial sky. So yeah, I always kind of go through the beginning part really quick, so I thought I would show it a little better in this video. So basically I tape down the paper with the masking tape so that it doesn't start bubbling and curling, although I must admit that it only minimizes the damage. It doesn't really stop all of it, but it helps a lot. Especially if you're water heavy like I tend to be. When I put down the tape, I kind of use this slight transparency of the tape to kind of eyeball the wideness of the little trim, like the little white trim that I tend to leave around my paper. The reason I do that is because I assume that the artwork is going to go in a frame. So if it's going in a frame, as much as your image needs to be the size of the frame size, like for example with this one, it's 8.5 by 11, you have to take into consideration that the frame needs to hold on to something for your image. So I always leave a slight margin just around to make sure that the frame has something to hold on to, and you don't have any awkward gaps between like the image and the frame, the picture frame. So just do that to make it things a little easier looking at the future there. So yeah, and then of course I cover the parts that with the latex just so that way I can let loose and go crazy and put a bunch of paint down for my background. So I decided to do a bit of a fade, so I wanted it to be like a night sky kind of fading down to almost like maybe a sunrise or a sunset. The first time around I do a few layers because, well, I like using a lot of water because I like that fadey watery effect of watercolor, which is why I went into watercolor in the first place. But when you water it down a lot, it looks darker when you put down the paint than it does once the paint has dried. So it usually takes me a couple of layers to get that right pop of color that I tend to personally enjoy. Of course, the nice thing about watercolor is you can go the complete other way. Like if you want like a more pastel-y look, then you wouldn't need to do as many coats or make it as pigmented as what I'm doing. You would also probably be a little nicer to your paper than I am, because I really test the limits of my paper, I must tell you. Since I soak it with water, let it dry, soak it with water, let it dry constantly. So for the where the girl is sitting, I didn't really want anything complicated, so I kind of went with a bit of a gray wash down there, and then gave her a bit of a shadow, but nothing overly complicated. Backgrounds aren't necessarily the important part to me when it comes to a picture, because I feel like if you put, and I mean it really depends on the image, and I'm probably gonna contradict myself later on, but sometimes it's just nice to have a simple background so that your piece itself can kind of stand out a little better. But it really depends on the piece. And my favorite part, distracting myself because I really like peeling off the latex. It's just so much fun because it looks messy, it looks gritty because there's all kinds of paint dried onto it, and like, you know, you've put all this effort into this background, and then I always feel like when I pull off the latex it's like kind of magical because it's like it kind of really shows you, like you kind of really see the difference you made on the background, you know, like it's like that crisp white against whatever you've painted, right? So it's always my favorite part. And yeah, so here is the thing with the latex is it's not paint, it's latex. It's like this liquidy substance, so when you're putting it on, it's very hard to be extremely accurate. So you see me painting around the subject a little bit. That's actually me correcting the latex mistakes. You know, like this the lines around the body. It's very hard to get them perfect because it's not just a thin layer of paint that you're like gently washing a few times. It's like just glop of latex. So I just fix a little imperfections afterwards, and it's not really a big deal. So then I start with the skin tones here. I find sometimes people have a hard time mixing skin tones, so if you're curious, most of the time when I do skin tones, I really just water down yellow ochre. So it's really easy. So I just I use a lot of water and a little bit of yellow ochre, and that gives me the wash that I like. Because when it's paled down or thinned down enough, it just looks like a skin tone. And usually, because my backgrounds or my elements are generally quite saturated and colorful, in contrast, the yellowy skin feels more natural. Now, it really can depend. Like, you might want a cooler skin tone, and if you're working with a really warm background, because otherwise it would kind of blend in. But here, seeing as the background is mostly blue and purple, the yellowish skin tone kind of pops out better. Like, gives it a little more presence, you know. So here I'm just shading. It's not that small of a format, but it still feels a little small when you're like working on a little character like this. So like shading becomes kind of delicate, you know. It's hard to kind of show like teeny tiny little fingers and teeny tiny little shadows in this scale, but that's also kind of part of the fun, you know. It kind of gives it its own style when you're working really small because you have that limitation. Something I do a lot too, which is kind of unique to watercolor, not that I'm an expert in other kinds of painting, but is I like to lift paint a lot. So like sometimes I'll put paint down, and then I'll use a clean brush, well, as clean as my brushes get, like here, and then I'll kind of push away the paint that I put down. It only tends to push away the top layer that you most recently did, and it gives it that like really faded look. So like on the leg, for example, you can see that it gives it that kind of pearly, like very faded lighting, and I like that look, so I tend to use it a lot when I'm trying to do lighting. So I know a lot of people go from light to dark, but I don't think I follow a specific rule when it comes to that. Sometimes I'm like doing it very light, and then other times I return to doing dark, and then I just kind of push away the excess paint to do the highlight. So it really depends. There's no right or wrong when doing any form of art, really. It's just what works best and what doesn't work best in this situation with your set of skills and your materials, right? So, for example, a very good example here is I'm using metallic Sharpie to paint the stars here in the sky, because I thought it would be more interesting if to give it like that metallic sheen, like that artificial sheen. Like I said, my intent was to make her look up to a bit of an artificial sky, or like perhaps it's a wall in her bedroom, or you can imagine what you want, but that was kind of the look I was going for. So the sky is purposefully kind of cartoony. So there isn't like yeah, right there you might have noticed. Apparently I forgot some latex on that one star, so I tried to paint it and then it wouldn't paint, and I'm like, what's happening? And it's because I like forgot to take off the latex on one specific star. The latex I have is white, and then my paper is white, so that's fun. I recommend, if you're planning to get latex, to get a different color than the paper that you generally use, because then it's easier to see. I didn't have access to any different colored latex, so I went with what was available to me at my local craft store. But yeah, so yeah, what I was saying is that with materials, it's not necessarily like I didn't go and buy some extremely expensive like metallic inks or something to like just do these little stars. Like I just used some metallic Sharpie, and it did just as good of an effect, you know. So it's not because a material is more or less expensive that it's going to give a more or less good result. It's really how you use it. Like for example, like I knew that these were going to be flat, like I'm not going to shade with them, so it doesn't matter if I use a Sharpie in this moment. But like if I wanted to color the face here, it'd be a lot harder to do with a Sharpie because Sharpies don't blend, right? So it's just kind of being aware of your material, you know, playing with it and testing it out and then seeing what it can and what it can't do, right? So that's to keep in mind, although I feel like a lot of people say that, and a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at it, but it's true, you know. You kind of make do with what you have, and then eventually you kind of accumulate things. Like when you like art and you kind of get into it, you kind of build up over time. You know, it's like it doesn't really fall on your lap, generally speaking, unless you're very lucky. But usually you kind of build up. You know, you're like, oh, you know, I wanted to try watercolor. Like when I wanted to try watercolor for the first time, I literally paid $3 for the palette that I got, just to try it out. It was like a $7 palette that I used a 50% off coupon on, cause you know, cause why not? So yeah, I paid like $3, Canadian dollars, specifically. So yeah, and he gave me something to try it out, you know. Like there's no harm in doing that. I feel like sometimes people want to get the most expensive thing right away, but like unless you know for sure that it's your thing, like it's hard to tell with art. Like I didn't know that I would like watercolor. I hated acrylic. I did acrylic in university, and I hated it. Like no joke, I would be so frustrated doing acrylic and so discouraged that sometimes I was just crying while painting. Like I was not happy. It's not my thing. So then once that, because I hated acrylic so much, I was like, I hate painting and I'm never going to be a painter, and I hate this medium, you know. But lo and behold, I try watercolor and it's just kind of a different world, you know. So you never know. Like I thought I hated painting when in reality I hated acrylic, and that's a different story. Kind of like how I really like sculpting, but I really hate doing ceramics. You would think it's all the same thing. It's like, well, it's 3D. Why do you like making clay molds? Like molds over clay, but you don't like doing ceramic? And I'm just like, because ceramic is hollow and fragile and finicky and it's upsetting. but you know, everyone their own. Some people do just ceramics, so don't be scared to try out a few things, and don't be you can sometimes be very surprised by what you actually end up being good at is not what you expect that you'll be good at. Anyway, enough going off into all kinds of different subjects there, but yeah, so here I'm just kind of doing a little bit of detail work. I'm trying to make the fingers look like fingers and not a random massive beige on the teddy's stomach there, and fixing up a few things. So here I tried to make the little eyes of the bunny to also be like the metallic, but you don't see it very clearly on camera. The sad thing on camera and like in pictures is it's never quite as nice as like the actual in-person art piece. So that's always a hardship. It's always a struggle. So yeah, so here's the finished piece. Thank you so much for watching. A lot of my pieces are for sale, so if you're interested in getting any of my work, don't hesitate to go over to my Facebook page and drop me a note. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, guys.